Morning, everybody. Let me extend my welcome to all of you. This is your first time here. A good portion of our people apparently are at the beach, so we're glad they're out having a good time. We'll see them in hell. All right. As if I have not been off for the last 4 weeks. Many of you are guests in here, so welcome. I know this church is small enough where I can kind of fill out who's in the room. And I just want to say welcome. I do hope you feel comfortable at some level. We've been in this series right here called The Energetic Exchange, a fierce prioritization of your well-being. Last week we started it, and we got detoured because our current administration dropped bombs on Iran, and we felt like we needed to have a conversation. And so this week I want to start into it a little bit, but then I also need to yet again address some things that our administration is doing. Because as a pastor, a part of my calling, vocation, job is to keep the flames of fire on the feet of this administration. That's a part of what I am doing. It is a long heritage throughout the biblical narrative. You can start in Genesis 1, work your way through, and what you'll find are people all throughout the text having to shine a spotlight on injustice that's being covered in the name of their God. All right? And that's a part of what all the Old Testament prophets did. But then when you get all the way in the book of in the New Testament, you get all the way to the book of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you see Jesus doing this very thing, John the Baptist doing this very thing, all the way to the Apostle Paul, all the way through. All right? So that said, I want to get into this for just a few minutes, and then we'll see where it takes us. Part of what spurred this series on is I began to ask a very simple question to a lot of people in our collective, people that aren't a part of our collective, and it went like this: how are you? How you doing? And we kept hearing this response, went something like this: I'm tired. I'm weary. I'm fatigued. We heard people say this: I'm exhausted. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm drained. I'm spent. I'm depleted. And we've even heard people use this language: I feel like I'm on the edge of burnout. Or even people that have said, I feel like I'm burning out. Some have used images of juggling too many balls. You ever feel that? It's like you feel like the clown at the circus. Like there's just too much I'm juggling right now. Some have used images of I'm wearing too many hats. What if I told you you don't have to wear any hats? I know some of you be like, that doesn't make any sense. That's impossible. There are mandatory hats. We're going to talk about that in this series. What is mandatory? I want to talk about what you've defined as obligation, what you defined as non-negotiable. All right. I even heard some use this phrase, it feels like a low-grade battery drain. You feel that? It's like since this administration's got in, it feels like I came in with like full power on the cell phone, but then it's just slowly draining. Slowly draining. All right. So this is part of the reason that we wanted to jump into this conversation. Now, that said, I want to go to a phrase that you've heard numerous times today. Jesus said it over and over again. It's all throughout the Gospels, but it's actually found in a very archaic, old, ancient book, the book of Leviticus, a book that you probably rarely ever read through. It's usually, growing up for me at least, they would always tell us to read the Bible. And I loved as a kid, I would do this. I would start in Genesis because I always wanted to read the Bible all the way through. You know what I'm talking about? And I'm just curious in here, and I know we got like a lot of like quote progressives, unquote. Some of you probably never touched the Bible. Totally cool. But I am curious, have any of you ever read from Genesis all the way to the end, the Bible? I'm just curious, just raise your hand. Oh, wow. Okay. That makes sense. Now I know what's wrong with you. All right. So generally when you start reading the Bible all the way through, and at least for me as a teenager, I had the teen study Bible. You know what I'm talking about? Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even know back then. If you go back and look now, the teen study Bible back then had like rainbow colors on the front. They were ahead of the game, all right? They were just deceiving those youth at an early age, all right? And I had the teen study Bible, and I remember I was like, I'm going to read it, Genesis to Revelation. And I started, and I was like, oh, yeah, in the beginning, I worked my way through, got to the flood as a teenager. And I do remember even as a teenager going, wow, this God is so mean. I mean, literally said in the Bible, I was reading, it said, and God regretted making humans. God has regrets, and it's us? You know what I mean? Like, that's in the Bible. Go all the way through, got through Genesis, Exodus, liberation, freedom. God hears the cry of his people, sets his people free. Exodus. And then I was cooking and then got to Leviticus. And I don't know how many of you, if you've ever made it, here's how you know you're going to make it through reading through the entire Bible. If you make it through Leviticus. Leviticus might be the most boring reading you'll ever read in your entire life. And part of the reason it's so boring to you is because it's not written to you. This book, Leviticus, is a priestly manual. So already know this book was written to priests. This is why when you read it, you start wondering, why is there so much detail about sacrifices? Yes, because it's written to priests who manage the sacrifices. This is why it can feel so tedious and repetitive. Remember, they didn't have iPhones. They didn't have iPads. You couldn't Google. There was no AI. The only way that you knew something is that it was passed down orally. So to make sure you got it right, you had to continually repeat all the details over and over again. And this is what you have. And so this is why there are all these regulations around ritual purity. And what I want to read to you today is what is called the Holiness Code. Now, to break down Leviticus, you could break it down in two ways. Leviticus chapter 1 through chapter 16, it's basically the writer saying, here's how you get yourself sorted with the divine. Okay? All the sacrifices, all that kind of stuff. Leviticus 17 through 27, here's how to live out this new relationship with the divine. And what I want to read to you today is found right in the heart of that second part. It's Leviticus chapter 19. And in Leviticus chapter 19, as ancient and barbaric as this text may feel to us, the blood of animals offering up to God, as ancient and barbaric as that may feel, there is a giant, monumental, evolutionary leap right in the heart of Leviticus chapter 19. And the reason I know that is because it's all throughout the New Testament. And most people think Jesus just came up with it when he arrived. But Jesus, again, not American, good Jew, okay? And Jesus, being a Jewish person, knew something about these oral images and oral statements that were passed down throughout the generations. And so Jesus, again and again, starts quoting, and what he's quoting is Leviticus chapter 19. A lot of people are surprised this phrase is in there. Now, let me say something about what we're reading, because anytime you jump into an Old Testament text like this, you can make it say just about anything that you want, and it's very dangerous to take an ancient text like this and then take our current world and try to blend those two together, okay? So let me say a couple of things about Leviticus 19. First of all, what you find in the Holiness Code is a list of commands prohibiting the oppression and exploitation of Israel's weak and poor. Again, you'll see things like, leave a corner of your field for the poor and the alien. Do not oppress your neighbor. Do not exploit your employees. We should probably park there. Can we talk about how ridiculous minimum wage is in our culture? I mean, I don't know if y'all know, because most of you probably don't do minimum wage anymore. But just to be clear, you do know you can't even buy a meal at Chick-fil-A for $7, right? And this is what we're offering people in our society? When you start talking, I'll start cooking. All right, here we go. Or here's Leviticus. Don't discriminate against the disabled. God, talk about a group of people who've been pushed to the edges. Do not do injustice or show partiality in judgment when you're in a court case, or slander or witness against your neighbor. All of that is like packed right in Leviticus 19. And then there's something said in Leviticus 19, 17, and 18 that I want to read to you. And this is one statement. And when you hear it, you're going to be like, oh my God, I thought that was New Testament stuff. I know, here we go. This is verse 17. You shall not hate in your heart anyone of your kin. You shall not, or you shall reprove your neighbor, or you will incur guilt yourself. Verse 18, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against any of your people, but you shall, and here it is, love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Yeah. Love your neighbor as yourself did not come from Jesus. It came from the book of Leviticus. Now, that said, let me give you a little bit of historical context around what's happening in Leviticus. The Israelites have been slaves in Egypt. You know the story, right? And God hears their cry, because God always hears the cry of the oppressed, and he sets them free. They make their way through the Sea of Reeds, and they find themselves on the other side in what is called the wilderness. And what you need to know about the Exodus is that they were enslaved to Pharaoh and his empire. Slavery is a fundamentally inhumane condition. Being owned and treated like property robbed the Israelites of their dignity and honor of being human. These laws that you read in the book of Leviticus are the start of a long process of the Israelites trying to build a new community together. I need you to understand that. When you've been enslaved and you finally set yourself free and now you're out on the other side, you then have to pause and say, all we've known is enslavement. So how do we collectively organize ourselves now that we're free? What do we do? They didn't know. They didn't even know fundamentally how to be human because they were treated in an inhumane way. So now that they've tasted some freedom, they're outside of this enslavement. The question is, wow, how do we organize ourselves together? What does it mean to be human? Are we going to have rules? Does everybody get to do what everybody wants to do? What are we? Who's in charge? Because Pharaoh's not here anymore. How do we set up ourselves? Do we need some kind of organization? And you got to imagine the Israelites. There were some, because there's always some. There's some that I think we're good. Let's just kind of do what we want. And then there were some that literally rolled out and they've got spreadsheets. You know what I'm talking about? And they're just like, we're going to have to organize ourselves. We're going to figure it out. And then there were probably some who are power hungry. You know what I mean? God, they're in every group. Like, I'll be the president. There should be one qualification to be the president of the United States. If you want to be the president, you cannot be. Do you know what I mean? Years ago, when our church was in just massive upheaval, I remember the old leader had left, and they were asking me to be the pastor because I was teaching here at the time periodically, but we weren't on staff, and the old leader stepped out. So we're in this transition season where there wasn't a pastor, there wasn't any. We had a board of directors that was trying to lead it, and so the board of directors were up here. And this was on a Wednesday night or something, and I remember I was sitting roughly right here with my wife, sitting right here, and they got up and they're like, "Hey, the pastor who started Vinings Lake he's gone now. So we're going to have to try to figure some things out. But here's how we're set up." They were trying to show them the inside, the structure. We've got a board of directors, and here's what the board of directors kind of makes these decisions of who's going to get hired, but then we'll all together kind of make a decision. And so one of the people in the back, I remember seeing her raise her hand, and she's like, "Who's on the board?" And they're like, and so all the board was like, "Us people." And then he's like, the board member was like, "Yeah, but we're open to other people coming on. We're always looking, but they're qualifications. You have to be here a certain amount of time, et cetera, et cetera." And I remember one of the ladies in the back was like, "Well, how do I nominate myself? Because I want to be chairman." And I just remember the collective sigh in the room of everyone going, she is aware of the fact that that's the very person you never want on a leadership team, right? And this is why, just a little inside baseball, with leadership, even within this collective, I work really hard. Our team works really hard. We look for what's behind the scenes between the cracks. Because here's the thing, I don't know if you know this, but spaces like this don't just exist. We fight hard to keep the religious BS out of this place. And part of the way we do that is we just monitor and observe, like, whoop, that's not VLDNA. You know what I mean? So we work hard to protect and create a safe space like this where people can come and be a part. And you don't have to put up with all the stuff you put up with all the churches you left to get here. You know what I mean? That's hard work. Yeah. But like with the Israelites, there was always that one person that was like, hey, guys, if no one else is going to do it, I'll take it. And this is what Israel's doing. They're just trying to structure themselves. By the way, that's called politics. And it's a good thing. I know it's been twisted and turned and blah. But politics is just our shared common good together, how we organize ourselves. Yeah. We have water coming through the faucet because we all decided who's going to be in charge of who gets to decide what water goes where and how it goes there. Think about all those details. There's nothing we can do that's not political. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm going to get in my car. Somebody made decisions about how that car is going to operate and if it's proper to operate and if it's helping the earth or not helping the earth and if it's in danger of others or not. Yeah, I go home, cut on my water, took a shower this morning, all that. I took a shower and I'm like, well, this is political. Who gets to decide how much the water is? You know what I mean? Electricity. My electricity went off this week because apparently in Atlanta now we get storms every afternoon. So my electricity went off. I was right in the middle of writing something epic, and my electricity went off, and then I got real nervous because that means my internet went off, which means it's not automatically saving. And I realized I was like 3 paragraphs in. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do without power. But it was the perfect time to write because it was hailing outside. I mean, dropping balls of hail. And I was like, I was in writer mode. You know what I'm talking about? I'm like, cooking. And then I'm like, oh my God, if my computer's like down to 3%, if this thing dies, it's all gone. So what do you do? And this is how you know you're living in 2025. I'm like, I pulled out my cell phone, which had a little bit of battery left, and started taking images of my computer screen so I could remember, right? Because you got to load it up to the cloud. You know what I mean? Like, if it's in the cloud, we're good. I don't care if the power goes out. Yeah. Who gets to decide about the power? Who put Georgia Power in charge? Who nominated them? Yeah, who voted them in? And then who gets to decide how much they charge for the power? You know what I'm saying? This thing runs deep. But you could go even further. Who gets to decide who you get to love? Yeah, who makes those decisions? And who said the Supreme Court had that much power to get to decide who you get to love and who you don't get to love, as long as it's consensual? Yeah. And how far does it go? Are we okay with the Supreme Court being in our bedrooms? Thank you for your answer. It was rhetorical, but it's fine. I love some of you are like, depends on how hot they are. All right. Oh, we're off the rails today. Welcome to Vinings Lake. It's summertime. In the summer, we get to do what we want. All right. Now, all of that said, the Israelites are creating a new life together. And they're asking this giant question, how is the world going to be ordered? And one of the most evolutionary statements in the Bible, somewhere in the midst of all these questions of how we're going to order ourselves together and just moving through the wilderness 40 years out there. How do we do this? We're trying to find our humanity and our dignity again and figure out what life is going to look like for us. And somewhere it slips out. Well, I'll tell you one way, and this is going to be huge. One principle to live by: love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I want to spend this week, and then I can already tell you we're not going to get to it because I need to talk about neighbor for a minute. But I want to get to that, love your neighbor as yourself, because there's something implied in the command, right? But we'll get to as yourself next week. This week, can we just talk for just a minute in light of our current situation on what it means to love our neighbor? Because I feel like there are a lot of people really confused, and I don't really think it's that complex. There are a lot of people that see loving your neighbor in ways that are actually harming your neighbor. And they're harming and killing and dragging people off streets in the name of, quote, the Bible, quoting this very verse, love your neighbor. This is how you love your neighbor. So we need to have some conversation about that. And first of all, I'd like to say to every person that might be listening, I understand immigration is a very complex thing. I'm not up here giving you some black and white. It's really easy. No, I have spent time in the border. I've talked to immigration officers. I know how stressful their lives are. I do. I know they go home at night and drink themselves to sleep because they like intuitively know within them what they're seeing on the front lines is literally destroying their souls. Their families, I know some of their families, they're not well because dad's bringing home so much stress. He worked hard to get in the position because he wanted to do something to honor his country, but now he's getting commands that are rubbing against his own faith, and that's really hard. So I'm not here to try to pretend that these things aren't hard and gritty and they require a lot of work, and it's messy. It is. It's messy. I could not imagine being the National Guard and being called in like they were to LA. That's a real tough place to be in because you got to feed your family. You got to work hard. Simultaneously, what do? Look at your boss and say, yeah, I'm not doing that. And there were some that did. Good on them. But I want you to know there is a cost to pay for people who did that. You don't just get to, and I know, but they have rights to that. They do. But I also want you know how the internal system works, right? We all know this. You get slided in backdoor ways. You get cut in ways that no one will ever see. And I just want to remind all of us, the work that we're in right now, I know that you know this, but there is a cost for this work. And I want to say publicly to all of you, some of you I already know. I already know the cost you've paid. And I want to say to you, God, first of all, I know it hurts. I see the hurt. And I know you wished it wasn't this way. I do too. I do too. I still yearn for, long for, and dream for a world where none of this even exists. Where there isn't friction and tension. Where mothers and daughters still love each other and speak to each other. Where fathers and sons still have relationship. Yeah, I long for all of that. But I also want you to know that sometimes it's in the chaos, the disruption, the upheaval, and the conflict. It is through that is the way that we actually move into new stages of consciousness. And so you don't have to fear the conflict. You could actually just embrace it. And as uncomfortable as it might be, what if I told you that uncomfortable feeling is the very portal through which we're going to move into a country that is actually better than how it was when we arrived? But we're going to have to walk through some uncomfortable things. And that's challenging. So I want to say to all of you who've paid a cost, I get it. I get it. We've talked about this before. There was a season at VO years ago where people paid a high cost just to attend this place. I'm talking about parents that were writing notes to me about their kids that came here and how Thanksgivings and holidays were hell for them. I'm talking about I'd give a sermon, I would push a post out, and then I would find out that good people within our collective were getting scalded by their own parents. There was a cost to even be a part of Vinings Lake, which always blew my mind. Like, what kind of parents I'm really worried about your church and where you attend church. And I'm concerned because I just feel like you don't have enough perimeters around your love. I know. It's hard. It's hard. I say all that to say this conversation on immigration is very complex. And there are relational dynamics, and then there are country dynamics, and there's so much. And there's so much that I don't know about it that I'm sure some of you could run circles around me. Yes, I'm here to lean more on the theology than I am the actual issue here, right? But I get it. I mean, you could go all the way back to the 1700s when the first immigration law was actually given, right? And then you could work your way through. I will tell you, if you start there and you work your way through, because just to remember this, we are a nation of immigrants, right? And it is good to remind you, anytime you're talking about immigration, we came in and stole the land that we're on. It is good to just remember that. Because the reason I mention that is because it helps you be a little bit more humble. So instead of coming in being like, I'll tell you what we're going to do, we're going to keep so-and-so out of here, just great. But as you're making your immigration law, can you do it with the humility of realizing that you came in, stole property, and then committed genocide to take the property? And maybe you should consult with our Native American brothers and sisters before you start making immigration laws. And then what amazing would it be in our world if Native Americans actually got back on top and they were the governing authorities since they owned the land before us? Yeah, I know. Um, all of that I'm holding. I get all of that. But where I have heartache is when I see Christians, or at least self-proclaimed Christians and evangelicals, blindly back the inhumane treatment of what is happening right now in our country. And then not only them doing it, part of the reason I'm even talking about this, I'm not interested in all the cultural wars. It's not my thing. But I am interested in the fact that not only are they blindly backing inhumane treatment, but the reason I get pulled in and want to have the conversation I'm having today is because they do it and then they proof text with a Bible verse. And what I'm starting to see right now, I leaned over last week and I said something to Katie. We were sitting on the couch watching something. I think I've said this before, but I'm like, man, can I just be real honest? Real, like, you haven't been honest enough? I'm here, full transparency. I don't know what's going to happen when we die, and I don't want to be arrogant enough just to believe that I'm going to prance in there somehow, wherever there is. But man, I have some questions for what some people call God. And I love the Old Testament. If you're like, if you need Bible, it's all in the Old Testament. The lament Psalms are beautiful. It's basically them just shaking their fist like, what? God? But I have questions for God. Because what a weird way the path of love was set up. You ever noticed? Like if you really wanted like existence to be the way of love where there's no heartache, pain, all that kind of stuff, why did you make it through the most obscure thing called a Bible that's so complicated and complex? And then it dawns on me, well, because that's humanity. It's coming through the human species. But sometimes as a pastor, as a theologian from Emory, sometimes I think to myself, man, the world would be better off if there had never been a Bible. I know. I love that we live in a place now where no one gasps anymore. 10 years ago, now you're all like, dude, that was 10 years ago. But have you ever noticed how much trouble the Bible causes? I mean, even within politics right now, I have never seen a group of people like create policies all in the name of how they interpret Scripture. And then what's even more bizarre is we look at our like Islam brothers and sisters and we're like, oh, now that's dangerous stuff over there. Those people are out to kill us. Are you kidding me? How many people have we killed in the name of our Bible, in the name of our God? So I don't know how you distinguish between Yahweh and Allah, but I want you to know they're looking pretty similar these days. And on that, good night, everybody. I say that to you because, like this week I watched a clip and it just blew my mind. But I knew some of these things, but I'm like, God, it's so true. But I start thinking about what you're thinking about. I think about the Middle East. I mean, can we just real talk? This is like real inside talk. There's no structure. None of what I'm saying right now is in my notes. It's gone. But this is why it's a safe space. But you know, it's interesting. There has been trouble in the Middle East since I was born. I mean, I'm old enough now to remember George W. Bush. I remember him standing on a ship where jets were flying out, aircraft carrier, and he quoted Isaiah, "We'll mount up on wings of eagles." And And I remember back then I was in a stage of conscience. I was like, yeah, we will. Get them in the name of our God. But then over time you start growing up and you start going, hey, we should probably stop and ask some questions. And no one's justifying anything. Yes, you know me. 9/11? What? What a disaster. And my heart breaks for people that lost lives. No one's ever saying, oh yeah, give us more 9/11s. No, it was terrible. I stand against violence, all violence, at all costs, no matter what. No, I am anti-violence. Yes, that seemed to be the path of Jesus, and I think he was on to something, right? Now, here's the thing. Over time, though, you start to kind of look, historically speaking, and you go, wonder why they flew planes into our buildings. Now, here's what I heard growing up, because they're evil people. And those evil people hate America, and they hate America so bad because they have a false god named Allah, and that God tells people to commit violence. First of all, if you read the Quran, which we've got some brothers and sisters in here who know something about the Quran, I will tell you, if you put the Quran right beside the Holy Bible, there's probably just as much in the Holy Bible, if not more than in the Quran, about people committing genocide and violence in the name of their God. So it's not the Bible, it is the people that are reading and interpreting that Bible. But then you start to realize over time, well, wonder why they're so angry at us. Well, because they don't want women in bikinis. That's what I heard growing up, because women show too much skin in America, and they hate that. Or there's just too much freedom, liberal Hollywood, whatever, they hate all that, and so they're out to take away our freedom and our independence. But then you start digging a little deeper and you find out, oh, Osama bin Laden sent letters on why he did what he did? Bin Laden did? Well, we should probably just psychologically speaking read those letters just to see if there's any truth in them. And turns out, oh, well, this makes sense. Why did America build military bases on holy sites in the Middle East? If you're going to do that, just heads up, you're going to make some people angry. In the same way, if someone came in right now and built an Islamic temple on top of your sacred holy sites in America, but turns out we don't have any sacred holy sites in America. And of course we wouldn't, because the only sacred holy sites is the entire land because it's covered in blood. Okay, I better get through this, okay? But you start to realize, oh my goodness, yeah, it was evil, but these are people that are angry because we insist as a nation to run the world. And so you have to start asking giant questions. And we do all of this with Bible verses in proof text. And so I'll just share this with you, and then we'll wind this thing down for the day. And I want to read 2 Bible verses to you, and I'm not going to explain them. I'm just going to leave them to you. This week, a pastor in Los Angeles, California, at a non-denominational church like this called Cornerstone Church. This pastor is from Iran. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but this pastor sat in prison in Iran for his faith before coming to the United States of America. And he is a full citizen, and now he's given his life to start a church called Cornerstone Church in Los Angeles to help other people that are sitting in prison in Iran to escape their persecution for being Jesus followers in Iran. So this is the work he's done. He's been doing it for some time. This week, ICE agents showed up at his place. And he was smart enough to pull out his phone and start filming, and I'm not going to show it because it made my stomach sick, so you can go and look at it later. But 2 Iranian Christian asylum seekers that actually had pending asylum cases, by the way, came here to the United States like many do through his church to flee persecution. And on Tuesday, a vehicle showed up in unmarked cars, by the way, I want to be very clear. If you show up at my house in unmarked cars and you jump out with mask, how in the world do I know who you are? So when people start dropping, let's just be very clear. That's not how you do things. All right? No one in this room's like someone showed up in an unmarked car, they walked out with mask, and they grabbed somebody. Well, what do, right? Tell me what you do. You don't just like, well, hey, they said they were legit. They showed up in unmarked cars, covered in masks, and they grabbed two individuals. The pastor was interviewed by Jack Jenkins for the Religious News Services article, and he said this, quote, "Seeing this masked man on the floor with this woman, I got triggered. I said, where am I? In one moment, I said, where am I? Am I in the streets of Iran again, or am I in the streets of Los Angeles? Because they look very similar." He went on to say, quote, "America gave us freedom here, but unfortunately, I had to tell my congregation not to come to church," which is shocking. In Iran, we hid ourselves. We closed off our buildings. And now in America, because I'm afraid, I have to protect my people. And I have to stand in front of my congregation and say, guys, don't come to the church, unquote. I'd like to just say, if you grew up like I did for years, evangelicals constantly talked about persecuted Christians in India and the Middle East. I cannot tell you how much they talked about that. You had end times, then persecution. In fact, growing up in the CCM world, DC Talk, you remember that group? They've been in the news lately, all right? DC Talk wrote an entire book called Jesus Freaks, and they were a book of people that had martyred and been persecuted for their faith. This was a big deal in the evangelical world. And I remember my own evangelical family talking about, man, the one thing we're here to do is help persecuted Christians and Jesus people all around the world. Great. We even acted it out in youth group. Now, I don't know what church you grew up in, but I know one night we all met in the basement of the church, which is already weird. Can we just go on the record and just say no churches should have basements, all right? That just shouldn't be a thing. Nothing good's ever happened in the basement of a church. Let's just throw that there. Because I grew up going to hell houses, and guess where the scene was in the basement? Hell. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, building churches moving forward, there should be no basements, all right? But we went down to the basement of the church, and literally they were acting out. We would be in a Bible study, and this was a part of it, and they had the local police people coming in through the back doors with their lights and fake pistols, trying to do like a church that was meeting in the dark being persecuted. And then at the end, they would read off all these martyrs and people that have been persecuted, and they would say things like, oh, we need to pray for those who are persecuted. Great. I want to say, wonderful. Yet again, evangelicals, I'd like to talk to you. Because you told me for years that we are to help persecuted Christians. Newsflash, they are knocking on our doors, and you will not let them in. And I'd like to go a step further. Some of them are already in, and they're being arrested, and they're being treated in an inhumane way. And I want to ask you, evangelicals, tell me again who your allegiance is to. Who is your allegiance to? Now, I know I'm learning the psychology behind what's happening with the Trump cult as we speak. I'm learning the psychology of it. I want to learn. How do we humans operate the way we do? Why do we get in bed with the people we do? And there are many reasons why what's happening in our world right now is happening. I get it. But one of the things that we got to do as a community is stay away as much as we can from the shame, okay? The only way we're going to move forward is if we can keep extending the invitation to people that have been deceived, people that have bought into lies. Because if we shame them, they'll never walk into spaces like this. We keep the invitation open. And what I want to say to you is, it's okay. Yes, we all detour from the path at times. But what better time is there now than to turn and come back home? What better time than now than just to confess your sins and say, oh my God, I made a huge mistake. A man stood up and held a Bible, and I thought that was the way of Jesus. And it turns out I was wrong. And right now, I'm excited to tell you this, but there's so many, it's happening. People, some that have reached out to me going, hey, I just want you to know, I see it now. I've never seen it before, but I'm on my way back home. And I'm like, yes, that's it. Let's keep waking up. So part of my job is, it's like, I want to just keep shedding light and exposing what we're seeing so people can see it for what it is, but then extend the invitation to say, oh my God, you're welcome at this table where there's bread and wine. Yeah, come on. I know. It's hard too. Isn't it hard to see the world in a particular point of view and then come to a realization, oh my God, that was upside down? Here's the great thing. Most of us in this room have had that experience. It's why you're here. And I want to take yourself back to that time when you had, what is it called, an epiphany maybe? And your entire world got turned upside down and you're like, wait a minute. I know. I loved that moment and also hated it. You know what I mean? I loved it because I was being pulled into greater inclusion and freedom and liberation, realizing, oh my God, God is so much larger than the Baptist God that I was raised with. But then at the same time, it was also like quite terrifying because I had this tradition on my shoulder just chirping away going, be careful, be careful. I'm like, be careful. You could slide into love that you can't control. I know. And so I would just like to say that I am not here to debate immigration laws. I'm not saying there should not be immigration laws. That's not my concern. I'm not saying any of that. What I am saying is that I believe this administration is violating the Constitution by not giving due process to the people that are in our country. And what I am saying is please, evangelicals, stop supporting an administration that treats people in an inhumane way. The way he dehumanizes undocumented immigrants is the furthest thing from the teachings of Jesus that I've ever seen. It is, in fact, actually the opposite of everything Jesus taught while he was here. And for those of you that might be in here and you're going, well, what does the Bible say? I encourage you to do your homework. I'll give you a couple of verses. First of all, Exodus 22:21. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Okay? So to my evangelical friends, I know you're going to throw out your Bible verses, but I just want you to know, if you want to prove text, we can prove text too. And I think, I might be wrong, but I think I got more to show you that what you're doing is actually not quote unquote biblical. All right? Because if all we're doing is playing a proof text game, come at me, because I think I've got more verses on welcoming the immigrant than you can on arresting and dehumanizing the immigrant. But here's the thing. Even if we went nose to nose on how many, so I could stack up Bible verses and you stack up your Bible verses and I still beat you, my concern, even in that, is you'll look at it and you'll still choose Trump. And what I want to say to you is, that's the wake-up call. Live your life. But the wake-up call is, if you're going to consider yourself a Christian, a follower of Jesus, then you need to give an account for the actions that are anti-Jesus. And then make some decisions. And one of those decisions is, where is your allegiance at? Okay. A couple more thoughts here. Leviticus 19, same chapter, further down. So love your neighbor as yourself. Just keep reading down. Leviticus 19, it's not on the screens. When an alien, undocumented immigrant, whatever word you want to use, when an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. By the way, think about this for a minute. Because you could swing it, and you're like, yeah, but he wasn't talking to the U.S. Thank you. I was like, yes, thank you. Thank you. Will you please alert Ted Cruz? Thank you. Yes. Yes. He wasn't talking to the United States. He was talking to the Israelites, a group of people, all right? Yes, remember, they're setting up a new way to live, how to be human. And isn't it fascinating that at the earliest stages of consciousness, forming a nation of sorts, a group of people, that even back then they had enough conscience to go, hey, as we start this, one thing that we should lay out is when aliens reside in our land, we shouldn't oppress them. How far have we come? Verse 34, the alien who resides with you shall be to you as the native born among you. You shall love the alien as yourself. And I think that's all aliens, undocumented immigrants and Martians. And they'll get here soon. You know what I mean? They're coming. Just relax. We can't even handle what we have. We're like, we're going to Mars. Please don't. Please stop. The world's mind is going to implode. We cannot handle more. Don't tell me there are other people. We're not ready for that yet. All right? Now, all of that said, he goes on to say, you shall love the alien as you, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. This is a call to love the immigrant among us, not dehumanize them or criminalize them or arrest them or deport them. It is a call to love them. One clap, we'll take it. All of that said, I need to wind this down, and here's where I want to say. This week, they'll be voting, you're aware of this, of the big, beautiful bill. The Senate budget bill will add $3.9 trillion to the national debt. But yet, let's cut it because we're out of control in spending. Just throwing this out there, you do see that hypocrisy, right? Could you imagine me going to Katie and being like, Katie, stop buying those shoes? We got to cut budget. And then she walks out and she's like, where'd the Range Rover come from? Don't worry about it. This is what happens when you don't have economists running the country, but you have someone, again, who has the maturity level of a fifth grader. He was never meant to be in that position of power. Someone who knows something about economics, can you please step up and help us? We're in trouble. We're in trouble. We're in trouble in this room right now, too, by the way. I can just feel my dad at the door going, I'm waiting for you to come out, son. And for those that didn't hear it online, this gentleman on the front row said, we're in bigly trouble, all right? Just so we're clear, $122.7 billion of the big, beautiful bill will go toward anti-immigration spending. $46.5 billion for border walls and barriers, $45 billion for new detention centers, $15 billion to expand deportations, and $16.2 billion to hire 10,000 new ICE agents. Yeah. Great question. Because I don't know if you know this, but they're homeless just like right out here. In the meantime, this administration's blaming all of our evils on a particular group of people who, by and large, 99.9% of them pay taxes. It's more than we can say for some. They start their own businesses. Did you know the number one employee for undocumented immigrants is in private homes? So you know what that tells me? Most of the very people voting on this very bill are the very people that has hired undocumented immigrants to clean their homes and mow their grass and paint their walls. And so we have a group of people standing up going, yep, let's tighten up the borders. We don't want those drug traffickers in here. Well, just to be clear, when we tighten them up and I start showing up, you've lost half your entire workforce. Yeah. And all of this said, there's so much that we could say about this. And I know many of you, it's like preaching to the choir. You're like, yeah, come on, bring it. Let's get some more clicks on the internet. I'm not interested in that, but what I am interested in is just to tell you this. I believe immigration laws, by and large, many of them are rooted yet again in white supremacy. And I'm trying to pull back the curtain because what you have are laws and people just trying to say, we can't just keep open borders. No one said we were going to. Of course. That makes sense. What we're saying is stop the inhumane treatment, stop dehumanizing people who are starting businesses in our country and working far harder than most Americans. And what I'm also saying to you is, of course, no one in here is expecting you just to open things up. That would be foolish. But what I will tell you is I think it's really, really smart of all of us to start looking at these laws that are being passed and realizing ever since the 1700s forward, as these laws come into motion, it is really telling that the people we are pushing out, they look a lot different than us. And the people that we're allowing in seems to look like a particular group of people. So yet again, I just want to be exposed. I want you to see it, that white supremacy can and has infiltrated the very policies that are being passed, especially immigration. And how boring would America be if there were all white men like me? Imagine just getting up, going, oh, God, going outside like, I mean, this is gross. I don't want a world filled with me's. I just don't. I love me, but I love looking at color. My God. Can we get some diversity? This is what America's so beautiful about. This is why I love Atlanta. I do. Sometimes I don't like it because there's so many people. I get it. But that's just me. I'm an introvert. I got anxiety. I don't like traffic. But sometimes I'm in Atlanta. I'm going, yes, this is why we're here. It's one of the reasons I love this church. They're not all white men that I'm speaking to. I love it. I love people all over the place in this room alone. Some of you come from so many different religious backgrounds and faiths and theologies and, oh my God, ethnicities. And it's beautiful. I actually think that's probably pretty close to maybe what the kingdom of God is like. And I just want to say, man, all these immigration laws that you're passing, trying to let in people, a particular type of people, again, heartache when you get to heaven. You're going to get there and be like, where's the immigration laws in heaven? And it's my prayer, and I mean this with love, that the very people who have pushed out people who look different than them, I pray that when you die, you make it to heaven. I pray you do. Not sure, that's between you and God, but I pray you do. But when you get there, I pray it's hell when you arrive. And here's what I mean by that. Not hell in the burning sense. Hell in the sense that God says, everybody's welcome. Full restoration and renewal. But you, my friend, you're right down here in door number 2. And I pray you walk in the door and there's not one white man in the entire room. And the person who greets you says, welcome home. You're here for at least the first 10,000 years. All right. Let's close here. I'm at the 7th layer of Dante's Inferno, so we'll just close with a... how about I'll read a Bible verse to you and then we're done. All right. It was 12:15. Went a little longer than normal, but we're fine. Here we go. Matthew 25:34. You probably all know this. You could probably quote it by heart. But since we're talking about immigration, can we just leave this? Yet again, another Bible verse for those of you that might be conflicted on immigration. When the king will say to those at his right hand, come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a alien or immigrant or stranger or foreigner, and we welcomed you? And the king will answer them, truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me. Friends, I pause there on that note. And I just want to say, tragically, I believe most evangelicals would not welcome Jesus from Nazareth in our country. And yet, this is who they claim to be their Savior. And if we keep wondering why we feel like God's being left out of our country, I want to say to you, it's because he can't get through the border gates. He can't. And on that, I'm going to shoot fireworks this week, like you. I'm going to eat a hamburger, and I'm going to drink probably a Bud Light. Who am I kidding? Blue Moon, all right? All of that said, why? I don't hate America, people. I deeply love this place. I love you. I love what we've created here in this place called the United States. I say what I say only because I love it that much. We can do better. We will do better. Don't ever quit, people. We're just getting the engine fired up. We're going to keep working and keep working until the kingdom of God comes to this earth. All right, Bindings Lake, I love you so much. We will be back here next Sunday. Why would we ever take off the 4th of July weekend? We'll be here, so come. It's going to be a great time. Peace be with you. See you next Sunday.